To really appreciate the story that Stephanie is going to read to you from Luke's Gospel, you need to have a good background as to what it meant to be a Pharisee back in Jesus' day. Now, a Pharisee was a member of a very strict sect within Judaism that believed that the best way to honor God was to keep all the laws. Not the 10 Commandments only, but you add over 590 some odd more to them. They had a good heart, and they thought that they are giving thanks to God by really being careful to follow every bit of those 600 and some odd laws. Josephus, an ancient Jewish historian, said that the Pharisees were considered the most accurate interpreters of the law. They were experts in their country's laws, and they excelled the rest of the nation in observing religious customs. Some of them were even super strict. They were called the bleeding Pharisees because the super strict Pharisees would be going down the street, and if they saw a woman approaching them, coming towards them on the sidewalk, they would close their eyes because they didn't want to be tempted by lust. So they would keep their eyes closed and continue walking. And they bump into posts, walls, each other, hence the term bleeding Pharisees. They really took these laws seriously. And it's good to be righteous that way, but as human nature goes, they were also self-righteous because, well, they were better than the other people who could not keep, who did not even know half the laws, let alone keep them. So they saw themselves as the moral, righteous Jewish police, if you would, spiritually. That was their duty. And of course, they started looking down upon the others. Yeah, they're just not as righteous as us. They're not doing as they should like we are doing in the eyes of the Lord. So you could tell that it was only a matter of time before Jesus and the Pharisees would come to blows. In Luke's Gospel, no sooner does Jesus preach his first sermon in chapter 4 than in chapter 5, the confrontation between Jesus and these super strict Jews starts. In chapter 5, verse 17, he forgives sins and heals and makes the Pharisees mad. Later in the chapter, he eats with sinners and makes the Pharisees mad. In the 6th chapter, he eats grain on the Sabbath and makes the Pharisees mad. A few verses later, he heals on the Sabbath and makes the Pharisees mad. In chapter 7, he goes in to eat with a Pharisee at his home. A woman who is a sinner comes in, puts ointment on his feet, bathes his feet in her tears. She blesses him, and he makes the Pharisees mad. This leads up to the story you're just about to hear. After this confrontation in this story you're about to hear, then everything is ratcheted up a notch in terms of hostility. Luke records that the Pharisees, after this story, began to oppose Jesus fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. So with this in mind, please hear the story from Luke, and in honor of it, please stand.
While he was speaking, a Pharisee invited him to dine with him. So he went in and took his place at the table. The Pharisee was amazed to see that he did not first wash before dinner. Then the Lord said to him, "Now you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You fools! Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? So give for alms those things that are within, and see everything will be clean for you. But woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and herbs of all kinds and neglect justice and the love of God. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. Woe to you Pharisees, for you love to have a seat of honor in the synagogues and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces. Woe to you, for you are like unmarked graves, and people walk over them without realizing it. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated.
I just love it that Jesus lets them have it. Don't you? He nails them for their legalism. You strain at a gnat and swallow a camel, as it said in another passage. That they have totally lost the spirit behind the law. He nails them for doing things so that they could get the praise of other people. Like their holiness is a status thing for them. And one of the deepest cuts of all, he says that anybody gets close to them is defiled. If you were to walk on a grave, that was in ancient Judaism something that would make you unclean. It would defile you. And Jesus says, the Pharisees are like unmarked graves. You don't even know they're a grave, but just getting close to them is going to mess you up spiritually. Wow. And I have to say that I am glad that I am not like them. I'm not. Because I believe in Jesus. I am saved by faith alone, not by works of the law. Let me have an amen. Amen. I love this summer choir. That's right. Right. We're not bound by the law anymore. We live by grace. Oh, those silly, uptight, anal retentive Pharisees. But, and you know where I'm going with this, the older we get, we start discovering that there is a little bit of a Pharisee living inside of us. We can't help it. Because why were the Pharisees so bound by the law? They were bound to it because that's what gave them security. If they knew what's right and wrong, they knew what's black and white, they knew what to do and who to do it with, people who believe the same thing, then they have what they need in life. They're content. They don't have to think, they don't have to feel, they just have to do. The 600 and some odd laws are right there, clear cut. That's it. And you know, we don't really start off being Pharisees in life. Those Pharisees did not start off saying, well, I think when they're 3 years of age, I think I'll keep all 613 laws. No. When you're young, you don't even think about being a Pharisee because you don't need the security that the laws and the right and the wrong give you. When you're young, when you graduate high school, it should be such that all the horizons have opened up for you. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Who will you meet? Who cares? You got decade after decade after decade to figure all of that out. Right now, just live, have fun, enjoy, explore. But day passes day, year passes year. You make decisions that close those limitless horizons until you have a very narrow path to go down. You become no longer that golden child, the young rock star. You become the middle-aged has-been, maybe? You have the pressure of family responsibilities, perhaps. You have the pressure of succeeding in your job. And all along the way, you have to develop standard operating procedures. You have to call out for yourself what's right and what's wrong. You have traditions that become sacred to you. And this increases year by year. And you know you're getting older and more set in your ways because you start getting invitations to join AARP. And then Medicare Advantage plans. And after a while, you find that that nice button that you used to have doesn't work quite as well. You start getting a little crusty. And you start saying, look what this world is coming to. Or look at those people. Or why did they do that? You become rigid in what you think is right and wrong. And you find that in the way you parent. You find that in the way you work, the way you are at school. You find that sometimes even in the way you are in church. Sometimes you'll have a new member come in, they moved from out of town, they see a church that's new to them, they love it, love everything, maybe the worship, the staff, the music, the fellowships, etc. But year passes year. And as they ingrain themselves in the life of the church, something changes. Maybe the priorities of church or a worship style or a pastor changes, and suddenly it's, well, that's not the way I remember it. And they become more concerned about what they need from church than what Jesus needs from church. And it's human nature, because we build up the security that we so need. They, the Pharisees, become us. As one pastor wrote in the upper room, the Christians of one generation tend to become the Pharisees of the next. The Pharisees had started out on the right track. They wanted to live for God, but keeping the law became an end in itself. They forgot that the law was meant to draw them closer to God. So today, let's hear what the Master has to say about how to break out of this natural tendency that we all have, including your pastor, to be a little inner Pharisee. Because Jesus, before he laid out those Pharisees, gave this amazing verse. And it's a verse that you only find in Luke's gospel, by the way, only here in the entire New Testament. Jesus said, "Give for alms those things that are within, and see, all will be clean for you." That's a puzzling little verse. Think about it. Let it roll over your mind. As I reflected on it, here's the sense that I took. It's like Jesus is saying, don't worry about how you appear to others. Don't worry about keeping the letter of the law, about the outside of the cup. Rather, give to God a clean heart, a simple heart, a heart filled with love and concern for your neighbor instead of for yourself. What would that look like for you? How can you focus on the intent of Jesus' command, where you are concerned more about honoring God through love for Him and love for your neighbor, and less about honoring yourself by a self-righteous keeping of your own standards and right and wrong? I think there's a simple way to give alms for those things that are within. It is to do something, starting today, as we celebrate Independence Day this week, do something that shows you care more for that person than you do for being right. Do something for another person that shows that you're more concerned for that person than you are about appearing right. As Christian Americans, we need to do that. Because in our nation, my gracious, the divisions are there. It's one group of Pharisees yelling at another group of Pharisees, saying, I'm right, no, I'm right. The hope for America, Christian Americans who are not concerned about showing how right they are, the hope for America are Christian Americans who show how they can love as Jesus loved. Getting to know a person, loving a person, not judging whether it's right or wrong. The French historian de Tocqueville, just after our nation was born, 2 or 3 decades after it's born, he took a tour of our land and noted the spirit within the churches, noting the values, the inherent values in our Constitution about freedoms and rights. And he said, America is great because America is good. When America ceases to be good, it will cease being great. We Christians have the right and the responsibility to make America great by loving as Jesus taught us to love. Not trying to prove how right we are and how wrong they are, but simply being able to relate human to human, flawed soul to flawed soul, all in need of the grace of Christ. Practice that. Practice that at home. Practice that at work. Practice that at school, practice that in church. Wherever you are, treat another person as if they're a person and not a label. I get so tired of labels. Liberals, conservatives, baloney. We're not labels, we're people. Remember that. And we can never buy into that false dichotomy that we are right and those people are wrong. No, we're all flawed. And what unites us will be stronger than whatever could separate us when we listen to the gospel of Jesus Christ, who never put laws before love. There are good Pharisees in the Bible. In Luke's gospel, there are a few who will look out for Jesus and say, you don't want to go over to that town because they're waiting to trap you, Jesus. In John's gospel, Nicodemus is the most famous Pharisee who liked Jesus. He came by cover at night, you remember? And he was always in the background following Jesus, but he never came out until after Jesus died. Only then did he show that he loved Jesus when Jesus was dead. And he went and gave burial spices and anointed the body. Friends, we must not wait till Jesus is dead to come out. We have to come out and show our neighbors, our friends, our family, and our nation that we are called to a higher cause. We are called to love even as Jesus of Nazareth loved. As you take communion, I would pray and I would hope that you will find a strength that your eyes might be open to be able in some fashion to truly give alms for those things that are within. To help us sort of get into that mindset, I would recall to you that if you happen to have a passport, you know you have to renew that passport every 10 years. This is a public service announcement for you. Got to renew it every 10 years. One man went to the passport clerk and he had his old passport and he had a new picture of him. And as he handed both documents to the clerk, he said sheepishly, well, you know, I like the original picture better. To which the clerk, without missing a beat, said, trust me, in 10 years you'll like this one. Welcome to mortality, friends. The good news of what we've heard today from Christ is that as we grow older in body, we can grow younger in spirit. Love is the way to do that. And to remind us of that, we're going to have special communion helpers today. You're going to receive communion by young people. They're going to be going on a mission trip, some of them, in just a few days. They have their whole lives ahead of them. When you receive it from them, you look into their face, you thank them for the gift, and you remember that just as they are young right now, so may you be young in spirit, because love knows no boundary and no age.